Neal Masia from EntityRisk to talk about some of the nuances of what's happening within the digital health ecosystem, a little bit about JP Morgan. And to lead the interview is HITLAB's own Greg Bauer from the HITLAB strategy side of the practice and the work we do. Greg, thanks for joining today.
Thanks, Stan, very much. And Neal, thank you for joining us today. Really pleased to spend some time with you in a chat. I think continuing on, actually, when we talk about laying the foundation for valuation, I think this next conversation is going to be very helpful. Dr. Neal Masia is adjunct professor of economics and management at Columbia, but is also co-founder and CEO of EntityRisk. It's a firm that helps pharmaceuticals and biotechs address and potentially mitigate financial risk associated with drug pricing. They've developed a number of methodologies to help with that address not just clinical, but also commercial angles. And so welcome, Neal, and delighted to have you join us. Maybe you could take a minute first to provide a brief overview of yourself as well as your company.
Sure, Greg. Thanks for having me. Neal Masia. I teach at Columbia. I teach health policy at Columbia Business School and actually to undergrads as well. I'm an economist by background. I spent a few years in Washington doing policy things and then eventually spent 18 years at Pfizer. I was the chief economist at Pfizer and spent a lot of years in finance and strategy there. Left 4 years ago and started this company 2 years ago with my co-founders, who are both full-time faculty at University of Southern California, Dana Goldman and Darius Lakdawala. And the premise of the company was really to try to figure out how to help companies and investors assess how the world will decide what their new exciting products are worth. Obviously, there are really formal systems for that all over Europe and Asia, health technology assessment. And there's many different kinds of systems. My partners and many of our advisors are the leading innovators, I think, in the world at updating those kinds of systems. Pharmaceutical companies have certainly been dealing with them for a long time, but I think digital health technologies generally will be in the same boat sooner, if not later. And then in the US, there's this gravitational pull toward some version of health technology assessment to eventually take hold. And so we built the software company that we've built to help create tools that help investors and companies assess how their products will fare in those different systems, which leads to lots of different use cases, including not just sort of value estimation, but clinical trial design. What endpoint should I go for that might maximize my value in different kinds of systems? What is a partnership opportunity worth, et cetera.
Yeah, and actually on your site you speak to the actual there's no one size fits all when a drug comes out, right? There's this assumption that okay, it's a binary effect, it works or it doesn't work. But as your own site speaks to the fact that there's a distribution, every person has his or her own chemical reactions to it. The dosages matter, and all the variability around clinical trial success has to be given greater assurance so that you can manage the financial risk associated with pricing that drug. It sounds like your methodology has played into some of that as well.
Yeah, and I think there's two sides to the coin. There are differences between who's in the clinical trial and then who winds up on the drug in the real world. There are also differences between who's in the trial and how a different population in a different country might look. But the other side of it is how patients behave after they get the drug. This is where digital therapeutics can play such a huge and I think quantifiable role. Really, to give the person the first pill isn't really going to tell you what the ultimate outcome is. Are they going to stay on the pill? Have you identified the right patients? How are they doing in real time? These are all things that ultimately I think payers want quantitative evidence to show like why they should pay for these kinds of not just treatments, but additional kinds of therapies that digital guides can enable. And, what I heard at JP Morgan, I think, when people keep saying it was subdued, I put that up to the torrential downpours we were all being washed across the streets in. But the one thing I would say is that a consistent down note is worry about where the US market, which, let's face it, funds a huge portion of the incentive to innovation around the world, where that's going to go over the next 3 to 4 years as CMS tries to implement these price negotiation rules, which for drugs, which I think will boil down to a choice they have to make between staying true to the sort of Obamacare era rules around not using quality of life adjusted years, and which really discriminate against the disabled, and the newer updated guidance Congress has given, which is like, hey, we need to spend less money on drugs, and so you guys figure it out. That's kind of the direction they've gotten. So it's a conflict. And what investors, I think, are most worried about is, is the US going to go down the road of most European countries and really just take price as, spending as the main thing, that if spending is high, we're going to reduce it, and we'll sort of figure out how to account for the value in some way. And that's why we really started this company, is to help companies prepare for that environment and to help investors understand what they're signing up for. What is the policy risk around this investment? That's something that I never, in my many years of going to JP Morgan, I've never heard more concern about, will this hold up to the policy environment? And so we're trying to help people understand that.
I think that what's fascinating about any healthcare conversation and about the use of digital technologies is it's a balancing act, of course, between cost and outcomes, as well as patient satisfaction or with experience. The whole notion of the triple aim is about trying to find that balance. It sounds from what you're saying that coming out of San Francisco, that this is a very ambiguous time as it relates to in the drug space, what this means around finding that balance.
Yeah, it's extremely ambiguous. Some elements of it seem to be more clear than others. So there is a clear bias, for example, in the regulations as written today toward larger molecules versus smaller molecules, right? So you're seeing a push, a subtle push toward larger molecules. Whether that's going to hold up over the next 5 to 10 years is anybody's guess. But what I teach in my class is that politics tends to trump economics. Okay, so you have shifting majorities in Congress. It's very unsettled. Not clear what 2024 is going to look like. And so I think all of this may yet change, but I think the gravitational pull is toward some assessment of value for all of the spending that CMS does, which is $1 trillion or more dollars. And so that's fair, but it has to be a system that people can accept and understand. And that's where we sort of hope to add value, I would say.
Yeah. I have just one brief question. I hope you can answer it in 30 seconds. I was thinking about the concept of orphan drugs versus more mainstream in clinical trials, and how a pharma may go about setting valuation with your tools to work with that. And with that, I'm going to let you answer, and then Stan is going to give me the yank in a second. So
great. I see I'm being followed by another correctly spelled Neal, so that's good to see. All I can say about on the orphan drug front, there are some exemptions and exceptions in the sort of CMS rules that give people a little bit of comfort that they will figure out a way to pay. But paying for orphan drugs are especially disadvantaged in most health technology assessment systems. And our tools certainly give companies a way to navigate around that in a way that I think the payers of the world actually find very helpful, because it's solving a problem they know they have.
That's great. Well, really, thank you for bringing your expertise and your experience from Health Week to our group discussion. And
Happy to
Stan, back to you.